So I was actually planning to go on a quite long break. It's the end of the year, the end of the school year. And I realized I should have probably taken more breaks than I actually did. In fact, I'm exhausted. And so I decided that I was going to take a break off of YouTube as well. And I thought this break was going to last at least 2 weeks. But there's a problem which I felt obliged to address, so here I am. They say people who are addicted to work just can't get off of it. So I'm back. I'm back and I'm here to make a video about something which I believe is a massive problem with the educational system of my country. Now, I haven't revealed this to you viewers yet, but you probably heard that I live in Italy, so I go to school in Italy. But next year, I'm actually going to move to England to finish my studies there. And there are many reasons behind that, but one of the main ones is pretty much because I'm sick and tired of how bloody ridiculous the Italian school is. And what drove me to make this video today is the fact that a lot of my friends, who definitely do have a lot to improve on, a lot of my friends are risking to do the year again. There isn't really a term yet. It's pretty much to fail the year and to redo the entire school year because they're lacking in like 1, 2, or 3 subjects out of like 10. And the reason why it annoys me, it hurts me that much, is because I can see that in the last 2, 3, 4 months, these people have worked their asses off to try and do their best to work as hard as they can at that subject. And the reason that they're not getting the results is because they've never been taught how to properly study those subjects. I can see they're studying their asses off. They're studying twice more than me. They're literally studying until like midnight, 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, waking up at 6. And the reason they can't get the results is because the teachers haven't ever taught them the proper method to actually study. And I'm not saying that they're not teaching properly, because I'd say a lot of them do have a good method of teaching and are actually good at teaching, but they've never actually taught them how to study the subjects. And their job is to actually teach the information, no? But in this Italian system, where it's pretty much fundamental to pass the tests, and passing the test is more important than actually learning stuff, which is ridiculous, but we'll get more into that later. It should be more important to actually teach them how to study rather than actually teach them the stuff in general. So, obviously, a lot of you people are from other countries, and most probably you're actually not relating to this stuff. So, if you don't understand what I'm talking about, if you pretty much don't care, I don't urge you to watch the rest of the video, because this video is pretty much to the people who relate to this problem and want to see how they can actually pass these years working the same amount, even working less, but actually having a method. So, first off, why should you listen to me? I'm 16 years old. I'm one of the best in my whole school. And despite that, I'm one of the people who works less. I never work past 11 o'clock. Usually I work until like 10 o'clock maximum and 11 o'clock in like certain cases. And I usually get top tier marks. And if you don't know, the Italian system is considered to be one of the hardest school systems in the whole world. So, before we start, I'll give you a brief story about my personal experiences when facing the difficulties of this schooling system. So, pretty much in elementary school, I've always lived in Italy, but in elementary school, I was in like a kind of international school. So, the system was like a lot more English. It was like worksheets, games, and such. And so, in elementary school, I was used to the more like English school system. Now, in middle school, the sixth year of like elementary school, the first year of middle school, is pretty much the one where I start to face these problems. So it was the same school, but the middle school was like more Italian based. It was like more of the Italian system than it was the English system. There are like some subjects we did in English, and in those subjects it was still like the English system, but most of them were with the Italian system, and that kind of, let's say, confused me a lot because I was one of the best students in my class, and I pretty much came across this completely new way of studying and taking tests and passing, which confused me a lot and literally, I'd say it literally turned me into like one of the most depressed kids in the whole school. Like you would literally see me at 11 years old crying out of nowhere, reminiscing about like how good school was when I was in elementary school. And it was like I never had felt so stressed in my life. I felt like I was working more than my parents. And I was literally like working 12 hours a day doing like this middle school schoolwork. And looking at the work I was doing now, it's like I could do it in like 5 minutes. But I just didn't know how to do it because they never taught me how to actually do it. And so, one of the main things that's like only in Italian school, and like literally, I know people who like went to school in Spain, England, Australia, etc. They've never done this shit. And it's literally oral examinations where it's not like a presentation. Like, you study the stuff, the teacher calls you, you literally stand up, you're next to like the chalkboard, and the teacher will ask you a question, and you'll have to answer the question. You'll have to know everything by heart. She'll ask you a couple more questions. You'll have to like make a whole discussion without like any bullet points, like presentation stuff to look at to kind of make you remember the stuff. And by the end of it all, she'll give you a mark. And the whole problem with this wasn't that it was like too difficult to do, because during my entire time as a high schooler, I have actually haven't failed not even one oral examination, and the only oral examination I failed in my whole life was actually in the first year. But the problem is, like, I only kind of learned how to do these oral examinations through like studying with my mum, but that also kind of semi-traumatized me. I have nothing against my mum, I love her, but like I would remember doing like these practicing for these oral tests with my mum, and she would just shout at me because I wouldn't remember anything. And like I wouldn't blame myself that much because I had never understood how you were supposed to do this stuff. So yeah, the point of this video is pretty much to show the people who literally still don't know how to do it, and it's completely not their fault. So continuing this story, pretty much the way I got used to doing these oral examinations was literally by studying by heart, without even like most of the times properly knowing what the shit I was saying meant, especially for like the more technical subjects like science, etc. I literally didn't know what the fuck I was talking about. And it was similar with like history stuff as well. I've always kind of been semi-interested into history, so maybe some of the concepts I actually understood and some of the parts I actually enjoyed learning about. But when it's something you don't enjoy learning about, it's like studying by heart's the only way you get it into your head. And so literally the way I managed to get high marks in those 3 years of middle school was literally by studying by heart. I'm saying literally a bit too much, I should kind of stop. So I was studying by heart. I would study the day before without even knowing what the subject I was studying was. Like, I don't know, geography. I'm giving a random example. You were like studying some random country, let's say France, hypothetically. I would know nothing about France until the very last day before the test, and then I would memorize everything, and I would get like a 9 at the test, which is like an A plus, I believe, in the English system. And although this was all good, when it came to high school, the problems of studying by heart started to present themselves. And the problems of studying the day before started to present themselves. And although at oral examinations I still continued being quite good, it came to the point where a lot of written examinations, which were more about like the actual practical stuff that the theory of those subjects was studying, I did those tests and I would get really low marks. An example which I mentioned a long time ago, about a month ago, in a video I made was the lowest mark I ever got, like literally 3 out of 10, that I got in a science test, where not only did I study not just the night before, but literally some of the stuff 1 hour before I took the test, but all the stuff I studied by heart, I didn't understand, and by the time I did the test, I forgot everything. And to be honest, the 3 I sometimes consider to be like that, the turning point where I actually started to study well. But I believe it took me a few months before I finally realized what the proper method for studying is. And so let's get on with it, and I'll show you what I do. So here I have this economy book, which I started to read because I have to study economics next year. So I started to read this book, and I haven't really studied it, but I'll show you really what I do. So you open the book now. I've got a random page open, and chances are that some of the words are like written in the thick black font. I think you understand what I mean. I'll show you. Like, for example, here. Yeah, that word there, you can't read it because the phone's showing it like backwards. But yeah, pretty much those are the key words in inside the paragraph. So I'll tell you this for starters. If you just know the sentences where that keyword are found in, you'll already get a decently high mark. I'd say from a 5, which isn't that high, to like a 10. So you won't be like completely failing if you just underline and study the sentences where those keywords are found in. So for example, here it's this demand curve shows the quantity that is demanded at any given price. Demand curve is literally the word in the thick black font. You just underline the sentence. The next keyword you find, you underline that sentence, and that's already a good start. Now, if you want to go for these higher marks, what you do is you read the paragraph. I'd say you read one paragraph at a time, and you underline the stuff you believe is important. Now, reading the paragraph already gives you more context to the sentence that you've underlined with a thick word, but it also allows you to find maybe some other important concepts which help you give more further context that could be useful to remember. And the first step in trying to not study by heart is literally to underline those words that give more context and help you understand that sentence better. So studying by heart is remembering those key sentences and repeating them. Properly studying and understanding is reading the context. And why is it so important to understand? Because if the teacher asks you a question about what you've just said, you stand a better chance at being able to respond. So, a lot of times, what lowers my mark is the fact that my teacher will sometimes ask me questions, and most of the time, by reading the context, I'll actually get it right, but sometimes I'll answer it wrong and it will cost me a bit of points. So, next thing I do is to write all of those underlined sentences within a map, you could call it, or just some notes on notebook. So notes are obviously more messy. If you try and make a map, it'll be maybe more difficult to make it neat. But if it is neat, it's a lot easier to understand, and it's a lot easier to understand the subject in general. And the reason I suggest taking these notes after underlining is because if you have to revise, you open your notebook and it's 1, 2, 3, maximum 4 pages. While if you're constantly revising from the stuff you've underlined, you have to scroll through around 10, 15, 20 pages, and it will take a lot more time. And it also helps reinforce the stuff you just read and to help it kind of get stuck in your head. And finally, the last step is to read and repeat. Now, if you don't know, there's this, I think, learning pyramid. You look it up on Google, you'll find it. And it says that the best way to actually learn something is to teach it. So I don't just want you to practice repeating the stuff by heart, but I also want you to kind of pretend that you're explaining it. That way, you'll be able to remember it more. Now, I've made plenty of videos on school, and all of those videos talk about studying while you're at school, trying to do the most of the work in the school. And one of the main advantages is that if there is something you don't understand within the textbook you're reading, you can always ask the teacher for help. But to be honest, I don't blame you if you don't study at school, because to be honest, no one does. And there are a lot of people who get high marks who don't study at school. But I'll tell you, the advantages are you can ask the teacher for questions, you don't have to study till like midnight, which I did in the past. Now I don't do anymore, and I've never gotten higher marks in my life. And I just feel a lot happier with my mental health, and I remember the stuff more because I didn't have to dope myself with caffeine to stay awake. The one time I had to study till like 11, the day after I felt ill. I think I've mentioned that before as well. But chances are at school you want to socialize, and I don't blame you. I'm in that phase where I'm socializing a lot, and I should maybe be doing more work. But I mean, it's the end of school. I'm exhausted, and I've got like 3 tests left to do in total. And a lot of the subjects I'm never going to do again because then I'm going to England and doing just 3 subjects for my A levels. So that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about today. And I just wanted to address the situation with Italian schools because I did a bit of research and found out that 4% of students, excluding the 5th year where you do like the exams to graduate, 4% of the students from the 1st year of high school up to the 4th year of high school get to redo the year and fail the year. And this is a bit off topic, but another problem is that it's not always fair because you get some people who pass because they're in a really easy class where like the teaching isn't that efficient, the tests are easy. And then you have those classes like mine, which are really hard, where people are actually working their asses off to try and pass the year. But just because some teachers have harder tests in certain subjects where they're not good at, they risk failing the year. I think it's a massive problem, and I believe that if you are in the same situation as I am, if you do relate to the problem, I am sure you agree that it's really unfair and there's a lot of unfairness in Italian school. Because I do have that mentality of like survival of the fittest. I do have that mentality where bad things may happen to you, but bad things will make you a better person. But when it's straight up unfair, I believe something has to be done. Keep a strong mind and stay like a lion.